There were many causes of the attack on Fort Sumter. Many events became long-term causes and led to the Civil War. In 1788, the U.S. Constitution agreed that each slave would count as 3/5 of a free person for representation in Congress. This means that the South will have more power in Congress over the North. The pro-slavery states and anti-slavery states keep a fight up about who gets more control. The South is relying on slave labor to support their economy while the North states industrialize. South wants new states to allow slaves while North wants them to ban slavery, so they accept each state one free and one slave at a time. The Missouri Compromise said that Louisiana Purchase territory north of latitude 36 degrees 30 north will be free and anything under that is slave. To balance Missouri as a slave state, they bring in Maine as a free state. Texas wins independence from Mexico in 1836. When Texas is annexed into the U.S., a war begins. The U.S. wins and gains new territories. In 1854, Kansas is allowed to vote whether it is free or slave. Border ruffians or pro-slavery Missourians come to Kansas to tip the vote. The anti-slavery residents get furious and fights begin. This is known as Bleeding Kansas. On May 20th, Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner gave a speech about anti-slavery. 2 days later, he was severely beat with a cane by a senator from South Carolina. Dred Scott was a slave who sued for his freedom. Since he wasn't a citizen, he wasn't allowed to sue the courts, and this decision angered many abolitionists. Oregon and Minnesota was added to the North, and in 1859, John Brown, an abolitionist, led an attack on the U.S. arsenal in Harper's Ferry to start a slave revolt. Brown is captured and hung by Robert E. Lee. His death fueled all the abolitionists. In 1860, 80% of industrial power and 65% of railroad mileage was in the North. North's population was 18,306,000 and South's population was 7,984,000. In the election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln of the Republican Party was elected. This angered the South a lot, and they threatened to secede the Union. South Carolina was the first to secede, and soon more Southern states left and created the Confederate States of America. The South needed Fort Sumter because it's in the Charleston Harbor in South Carolina, so they are the first to attack. This is how the attack on Fort Sumter began and how the Civil War began.
The people and politics surrounding the attack on Fort Sumter are just as important as the battle itself. Abraham Lincoln was a Union president at the time. When the fort contacted Lincoln, he told the governor of South Carolina that he was sending supplies to the fort peacefully. The governor and Jefferson Davis, who was the Confederate president at the time, attacked the fort before the supplies arrived. The South won the battle, but luckily no one was killed on either side for the fort. After the South gained the fort, Lincoln responded by gathering 75,000 soldiers to defend the federal Union property. Jefferson Davis is also very important because he was the president of the Confederacy. Davis and the governor of South Carolina decided to attack Fort Sumter, and they ultimately started the American Civil War. Jefferson Davis also found a lot of confidence from winning the battle. Davis didn't necessarily want to start the war because he gave the commander at the fort a chance to surrender, which he refused. General Anderson was the commander of the Fort Sumter when it was attacked. When the Confederates decided to attack Fort Sumter, they gave Anderson the chance to surrender, which he denied for obvious reasons. General Beauregard was the commander of the Confederate troops surrounding Fort Sumter. Above Beauregard was Governor Pickens of South Carolina, and above him was Jefferson Davis. Beauregard positioned his troops on all land around the fort's army. The attack on Fort Sumter marked the beginning of the fighting in the American Civil War, which will turn out to be one of the bloodiest wars in American history.
Fort Sumter is a fort located in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. It remained as part of the Union even after the secession of South Carolina. In 1862, the fort ran low on supplies, so they sent a letter to President Lincoln. The letter said that the fort was low on supplies and that they needed more. So President Lincoln sent a letter to the governor of South Carolina saying that he was sending a party out to bring more supplies. The letter also said that the party would not shoot unless fired upon first. The South chose to take advantage of this opportunity, and the battle started. Here's a timeline of the battle. The battle started April 2nd, 1862, and lasted until April 14th, 1862. First, at 4:30 a.m., April 12th, 1862, the Confederate troops bombarded the fort and began the attack. Major Robert Anderson, who was commanding the fort for the Union at the time, waited out until daylight. Then at 6 a.m., Major Anderson made his troops report and eat breakfast. Through the fighting, many fires had started due to Confederate cannonballs. To the Union's relief, it started to rain around 7 p.m. Then, on April 13th, at 1 p.m., the American flag in the middle of the fort is knocked down and the Confederate flag was raised. This was symbolic because it showed that the fort is no longer in the Union's possession and that the Confederates had won. Then, on April 14, 1862, Major Robert Anderson surrendered, and later that day, they left the fort. And here is a map of Charleston Harbor. Fort Sumter is located in the middle. And here's a close-up of Fort Sumter. And here are the other important forts located in Charleston Harbor. Here's Castle Pinckney and Fort Moultrie, and then Fort Sumter. As you can see, the Confederates had an advantage because they could attack from every side of the fort. This did not make a difference to the Union, though, because they were low on supplies anyway, so the Confederates won.
The Battle of Fort Sumter had diverse reactions and effects in both the North and South. In the North, they got frightened and they realized that a war was on the way and coming fast.
Oh no, a war is on its way. They took Fort Sumter from us. What are we going to do? The South may be able to beat us this time.
In the South, they gained a lot of confidence that they could beat their Union in a war and defend their newly formed country.
We may be able to beat the Union and defend our newly formed country. Hooray!
In the North, the battle made Lincoln call for 75,000 war volunteers to defend the Union property. This was important because it showed that the North was preparing for war that they knew was coming.
We need 75,000 more troops, quickly, if we want to win this war.
For the Confederates, they gained more support from 4 more recently seceded states. Those states were Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, giving the Confederates 11 states in total.
Yay, we gained more states. More states is more power for us. Thank you, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, and Arkansas.
In the South, they gained a new fort which would later be used in the war to help them win some battles.
Yay, we gained a new fort, Fort Sumter. This can help us greatly.
Also in the South, they made a valuable hole in the Union naval blockade. This is important because it helped them last longer in the war.
Yay, we made a hole in their naval blockade. This will stop them a little and help us defend ourselves.
The most important effect of this battle was that it started one of the most bloodiest wars in American history, the Civil War.
Oh no, this is going to be a very bloody war. We will lose a ton of men. What should we do?